Diana Hart. I'm the garden director at Poplar Village Gardens, and I thought I'd talk a little bit today about why we let things grow and how we manage the things that we don't want while we are allowing the things that we do want to grow in. I'm standing here next to a stand of grass. This has been allowed to grow. I don't particularly consider grass to be a valuable crop in this area, but what I do find is that by not mowing, I am inviting in a lot of other things that I do want. And an example of that would be this right here. This is alfalfa. Now, I suppose that it can be used as a food plant. Animals use it for a food plant, but the thing that alfalfa really does is it creates biomass and brings nutrition up from the roots to the surface. And we can at any time, if I feel like it gets too tall, I just bend it over and stomp on it, and it'll lay down on the ground and decompose. But what it is for the plants is a nitrogen fixer, so it will allow the nitrogen to be more available to the plants that we do want. So what I do with the alfalfa in particular is I just let it grow until I feel like it's becoming overpowering, and then I just fold it over and step on it, and then that pretty much ends the process. Now, one of the things that I have really been exploring on this property since we've determined that the soil is safe is I'm really into foraging. So I've been researching and kind of looking into the plants that we have that have come up through not mowing that are usable in some way, shape, or form. And I'm standing here in an area where there are a couple of plants that are valuable for foraging in the early season when their leaves are new and young and small. Now we're getting into a season where they are going to seed, and one of the things that I've noticed on this property is that we have plenty of these kinds of plants already, so I don't need to cultivate them. If I allow them to go to seed, what that means is that their seeds show up in places that I don't want, for instance in my garden beds. So I'm going to show you these two plants. I can just tell you about them, but I'm also going to show you how I manage them, because the overall picture of this is it's quite unmanageable. I try to focus on the seed production for each of these plants. One is biennial and only goes to seed every other year. So if I concentrate on the seeding plants, I'm maximizing my effort. This is curly dock. Leaves are edible and pretty tasty in the early season. Now we're later in the season, they are not going to be edible or tasty, but what I can see is there's signs of a seed head coming on. And this plant I've actually cut off before, but I'm just trying to keep the seeds from happening. So I will cut those off and I will toss them away so that they can't do any further damage. I really do believe that if I let them go to seed, if we do not try to control them in any way, all of a sudden it becomes an unmanageable problem in the areas where we are growing food. Down here to my left is this plant right here. This is burdock. It has a really good food value, both the leaves and the roots, as well as some medicinal value. Now, burdock is a biennial plant, so it only goes to seed every 2 years, but I can tell by the way that this plant is coming up here that it is getting ready to go to seed. We have them everywhere. I am not ever going to be in any shortage of burdock, but what it does do is it takes up a really good amount of sunshine and coverage, which is good if you're wanting weed control. And I'm just going to clip off the seed head here. If I have more time, I can go back and I can dig up the root and I can do something with that, but in the meantime I've kept it from reproducing further. So the only plant I'm going to have is this one that is the part that remains. So I'm actually just keeping its population under control. One of the plants that we have to deal with a lot here is the black walnut. The black walnut tree, leaves, roots, all of its parts produce a chemical that inhibits the growth of other plants. And we have a really nice big black walnut tree in the backyard, which gives a lot of shade to our play area. I have welcomed it and I am allowing it to grow. I'm also doing some research about what we can grow underneath the black walnut trees that we have. What I am aware of is that one really big generous walnut tree can make a lot of babies. These guys, the black walnut trees that come up, they're very, very determined. And so one of the things that I do, and I do this very sparingly, is I actually work to eradicate these by using some poison on these. What I will do is I will clip off the growth. This one, if I can pull it up by the root, I pull it up by the root and just lay it down on the ground because it will not take root. But if I can't, then what I need to do is I need to get down here where the tree is coming up, and I need to find all those places that I clipped. This is a bingo bottle which has the dauber tip, and I've put Roundup in here, little stumps of everything that I cut off. And that is a good way of making sure that your poison gets to a very targeted spot, because we do not play around with chemicals very much here, but this is something, if you don't want it to come back, you definitely need to think about the usage of some chemicals in your garden. We try to use organic practices, so since this is not in a food area, I'm not really concerned about that. But the other plant that we have a lot of here that we also need to poison in order to eradicate is the grapevine from the wild grapes. This is a grapevine. And here's the grapevine. The thing that you really want to do with the wild grapes is you want to get back to as far back as you can to the parent of the plant, because it will spread everywhere. It will take root where it's laid down. But what you can do is you can keep it under control. You can see there's a branch that comes off of here, and this is the parent right here. If we want to cut it, we want to cut it right underneath where that branch comes out, as close to the ground as you can. You can get all of the growth out with one cut, and then you have to go back, because these guys, they are very, very virulent. You want to go back and paint the stump with the Roundup. This right here is a catalpa. They're actually pretty beautiful. They put off some nice flowers. I have one on the railroad tracks. It likes to make babies. They're not like super obnoxious, but what they do is they make big leaves. Big leaves shade your garden. These leaves will get to be about the size of a saucer. And so I just try to keep them out of the general growing space so that we can have a place to grow food. This plant right here is Virginia creeper. It creeps along the ground, and it kind of hides. Now, lots of other things will hide. You always have to, I have a bunch of newspaper sleeves in my wheelbarrow, because if I run across poison ivy, I have some protection if I need to, because the poison ivy also likes to hide in and among things like the Virginia creeper. The Virginia creeper is actually native for this area. It just has a tendency to get all over the place. It will climb anything, and it's wonderful if you don't have any plans for that area. It makes a very nice, lush, green wall. It can cover up stone walls and things like that that maybe you don't want to have. But when you are in the garden, you really don't want it. And if you look underneath this tree, among other things, you can see a lot of Virginia creeper. It's all in this area right here, coming up onto this hill.